Hello there. And what if you knew exactly how to take charge of your habits and change them at will? What if you knew exactly what it is that you needed to do to ensure that you could apply that in every area of your life? Would that be a useful habit to develop? Well, I hope so. And this is exactly what this talk is all about today. And I want to make sure that you get started within the hour. Welcome, I'm Gabriela Rosa. I'm a fertility specialist. I'm also a Harvard University awarded scholar. And for the last 2 decades, I have helped thousands of couples overcome infertility and miscarriage, even when other treatments have failed. And I know that we get a very good, success rate in doing exactly that. So it's definitely something that is going to be of benefit if you're trying to conceive and wanting to optimize your chances of taking home a healthy baby. We've now taken over 130,000 people in more than 100 countries through various programs. And I've learned a little bit about what it takes to help people to transform the way in which they make lifestyle changes and environmental changes within their day-to-day. So this is exactly what I want to make sure that I help you achieve today as well. I know that right now we've got a fertility challenge happening, and part of that process is definitely understanding a little bit more about how to make some adjustments to one's lifestyle. So it's definitely the right place to be if you're participating in that as well. And I want to acknowledge you because making adjustments, making changes, making, progress sometimes require breaking things, and it requires a little bit of discomfort, and coming out of your comfort zone is never something that people typically do willingly. It's quite interesting. I did a poll the other day on my Facebook profile asking, what would you choose? If you had to choose a devil, would you choose the devil or would you choose a new one? Guess what? 75% of people said that they would choose the devil they know, right? And so it's not unusual, and it's not unusual because here's the elephant in the room, right? We typically are wired to be able, in order to survive, the brain deletes, distorts, and generalizes. So it's very, very easy for us to get caught up in a routine simply by just applying it a couple of times. Making changes, we often don't quite realize what it takes, and I'm going to take you through exactly what a habit loop looks like, how it actually becomes ingrained, how it becomes implemented, and how then it becomes ingrained. And excuse me, what it is that you need to know in order to be able to make adjustments to that process, because there isn't a definitive process. The thing about it is that most people are quite unconscious about how it happens, right? So we just think that, our habits just appear out of nowhere one day. And that is very, very untrue. The truth is that we develop them by just, the brain doing certain things that gets us into a bit of a routine. And that whole deletes, distorts, and generalizes is exactly what it does so that we can survive. The problem with that is that it becomes dangerously insidious. It becomes, it happens so slowly and quietly, and often it's not by, you can't actually see it in the moment. It's actually by looking back that you go, but hang on a second, how did I get here? How did I start doing this? It's like the day that you wake up in the morning, everything is just as per normal. You wake up, you go to work, you finish your day. At the end of your day, you're going home. All of a sudden, you take a little detour into the supermarket and you walk out with a little tub of cookies and cream ice cream that you're kind of thinking, I might have a little bit, after dinner whilst in front of the TV. And all of a sudden, without even realizing, you've finished the whole liter of ice cream. But then it doesn't stop there. The next day, you kind of go, oh, that was nice. I might do that again. And, you kind of just go and you get the thing and you go home and blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, you look back at the end of the week, at the end of the month, and you can't fit into your pants. And that's how you know that maybe I have been overindulging just a little bit too much. And mind you, this doesn't usually happen as a result of one day, 2 days, 3 days, even though that's really almost all that it takes for the habit to kind of be triggered. right? Then obviously consistent repetition is what makes it be, a permanent part or a permanent fixture of what it is that we're doing. But it's not until the pants don't fit that you go, okay, now this habit has developed. It has certainly become ingrained. It has now become a problem. Gee, what do I do about it, right? And that's then where we start to try and break the habit, right? We do all sorts of things from New Year's resolutions to you name it, like there's all sorts of strategies that people use to break habits. The reality of it is that unless we understand how they're created to begin with and what it takes to continue and why we're actually doing them, it becomes almost impossible to break them because we want the result of that habit. In a habit loop, it's all very simple. It's like there is a trigger, there is a behavior, there's a result. What we're looking for is the result, is how is this going to make me feel? And in the moment when you're making that decision, because again, the brain deletes, distorts and generalizes, we're not identifying and isolating every single one of those little aspects to figure out, okay, how is this serving me or how is it not? And where is this even coming from? We're literally just on autopilot getting through our day. And that is a dangerous, dangerous place to be, because when we are on autopilot, guess what? We're not being deliberate. We're not being, insightful is completely out of the question. But we're certainly not being, what's the best way? I think deliberate is a really good way of describing it, because, when you are present, you are able to then see it for what it is, and you're able to then make decisions based on what's going to be best or not for you, based not on the present, on what's happening right now, but what it is that you're wanting to gain in the future. And that's also the thing about breaking or changing or addressing habits, is that we're often making decisions for the now, right? We're not thinking about what this is going to mean in the long term, even though that is the best way to make our decisions. We're just really thinking about, okay, you know what? It's just one tub of ice cream. It's not going to matter, right? But it does. At the end of the day, we know that it makes a difference, because it's not just what we're doing today. It's not what we're doing tomorrow. It's not what we're doing the day after. It's when we get back to the end of the month. And again, those pants don't fit. And this applies to everything. Believe it or not, it applies from alcohol to crack cocaine to binge watching TV to smartphone use to, whether we eat healthily and exercise regularly. It's the same principle. It's the same, typically also even the same motivating factors, but how they get addressed, and that's exactly what I'm going to explain and share with you, is that we do things from different perspectives, and we often don't recognize or don't realize that there are different classes of experience that we can choose within our habitual changes and choices that we're wanting to make. So I'm going to explain a whole lot more about that. But in the meantime, today I really want to share with you, as always in the Ask Gabriela Rosa live events, I like to make sure that we kind of keep things simple. And I'm going to share 3 big ideas with you about not only how to identify what it is that you're doing, but what it means and how you can make some additions to your repertoire of possibilities and choices that will lead to a different result. So are we ready? I hope that we are. I know that there's a couple of people watching, and I would love to know where you're watching from. And, maybe even tell me, what is the habit that you're wanting to change? Go ahead, give me a little bit of an insight. And if there are questions specifically around this topic, I would be absolutely delighted to answer. So this is these talks, I'd love to make them as interactive as possible. Today we're only doing Facebook. We're not doing Instagram, but certainly, if there are questions as we go along, go ahead. Make sure you put them in the comments, because I would love to make sure that we address them. This topic is such a topic that I know, in fact, this is a topic that I actually am wanting to do a course for my patients on, and we're going to make it into a 3-week course. There's so much to talk about, and there's so many different ways in which we can actually address this issue. Because for some people it is an issue. And I laugh because, the example of the cookies and cream ice cream, I know that you guys would never do such things, like never, I'm sure. It's just a problem that I used to have. And, I know it's a tough one. It's a tough one. The thing about, life is that life mirrors, work all the time. And often the things that I get to help my patients the most on are the things that I've had the biggest personal experiences with, So this is definitely one of those. Hey, Chantel, great to see you from Perth, Australia. So yeah, let me know where you guys are calling from or watching from. April's here too, Ontario, Canada. Very cold, very cold. But it's lovely. I love it when you guys interact, and I love when you ask questions. So go ahead and, feel free to ask questions, and we'll go from there. The very biggest, oh, hello, Angela. Okay. Trying to get enough sleep is always the challenge, but it's a very, very important one. So, and I can see, I recognize the names, which is lovely because, I know, Fertility Challenge is on. So it's great to be able to put faces to names. And look, Chantel's saying that biggest habit change is a consistent diet. And, it's really fascinating because that's one area that we all struggle with so much. And I think that there are a couple of different variations in there. And by the way, next week in the Ask Gabriela Rosa Live, I'm actually going to be doing how to eat your way to parenthood. So I'll talk more about that, at the end. But, and I'll certainly be adding some, because this is one area that most people struggle with, is making adjustments and changes to dietary habits, to lifestyle habits. All of those things make a huge difference to how the body operates, how we feel, certainly to the increased chances of taking home a healthy baby. But it's almost like they're the hardest to actually consistently implement if you don't have a good strategy around it. Because what happens is when we're in the moment, it's so easy for us to basically tell ourselves, oh, it's fine. One bad meal isn't going to be a problem, and then we tell ourselves that the next meal that we're about to have. And then we go, oh, I've had 2 bad meals today already. I might as well just kind of scrap this day and start again tomorrow. So then what happens is we do that. And then the next day, the same thing happens. And the next day, the same thing happens. And then we just go, you know what? This week is just a write-off. I'm just going to go ahead and start this, next week, or next year, or next decade, right? Which I'm sure none of you, again, have made resolutions around, starting a new decade with different lifestyle habits. I know that has never happened. But the reality is that the biggest, saddest piece of this is that most people who do that end up by the 18th of the first month of the year going, oh, forget it, and making no change to what it is that they wanted to change in the first place. So I want to make sure that we understand that this is about a strategy. Right? This is about understanding our human nature and how do we change, how do we orchestrate what it is that we want to create in such a way that it makes it happen. And so that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be sharing that, those 3 big ideas based on that. But let's part from the principle that essentially is true, is that as humans, we are inherently lazy. We want easy, we want convenient, we want it now, and there we go. We got that out of the way, right? We want the magic pill, we want the quick fix. It's just how it is, right? And the quicker that we acknowledge that that is the case, the better. Because then we can get past the fact that, we're telling ourselves certain things and we're wanting to believe others, right? We want to believe that we can do it, that we have the willpower, or that we, want to actually make a change. Did you hear what I just said? We want to believe that we actually want to make a change. But often the truth is that we don't. We don't at all, right? We have no intention. We know we should, right? But we have absolutely zero intention in actually making that happen. And when that happens, it's even harder to create change because all of a sudden we know that there's really no buying in from the person who wants to create that different outcome. So that becomes a bit of a problem. And that's where the so-called bad habits, get developed, get ingrained, and are so easy, by the way, to develop because Mind you, so are good habits. If you know what it is that habits actually look like, all habits are easy to actually implement and to ingrain if you know what it is that it takes. But typically, because it's such an unconscious process, right, we end up defaulting to what's easy and what's going to get us, instant gratification, what's going to give us that kind of instant feel of just comfort that we're trying to achieve. And that's particularly true when it comes to diet, because most people make poor dietary choices based on an emotional, immediate wanting to change a state of being in that moment, right? People eat because they're sad, people eat because they're angry, people eat because they're happy, people eat because of all sorts of reasons that have absolutely zero to do with hunger, right? And it's a deeper hunger. It's a hunger. What are you actually hungering for is actually a very good question to ask, because usually it's not food, and we stop to pay attention and we start to listen and hear what it is that we actually want. But the fact is, most people, and this again applies to everything we're talking about in the context of food, but it applies to everything. It applies to every action, choice, and inaction that we choose to allow. Right, and those are parts of our own psyche that we need to examine. We need to understand what it is that is driving us to a certain action or mode of behavior. So that's really what it's all about. And good habits, in the same way that bad habits develop, good habits develop in exactly the same way. And we're going to talk a whole lot more about that. But it's that we need to really be engaging with the fulfillment of how we want to feel. And there's a great story. I actually came across this story, and I'll read it to you. I came across this story some years back. And one thing about making adjustments and making changes is that, and I'll talk about this in a moment, is that it's about creating the beaten path, right? And you will know much more about what I mean in just a moment. But there is a story about the wolf, right? The wolves you feed. It's an old Cherokee story. It's an American Indian story. And that's basically, I'll read it to you. So one evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It's anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It's joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" And the famous answer, the old Cherokee replied, "The one you feed." And when it comes to habits, it's no different, right? And that's really the very first big idea is about knowing thyself, right? It's so easy to become, autopiloted when it comes to this. But the truth is this: habits, they become ingrained because we do them, right? And we engage in them again and again and again. And the beaten path that I talk about, it never gets erased. It can become overgrown, but it doesn't disappear. So imagine this for a moment. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine an unattended field, right? Huge, huge field, grass as far as you can see. And at the very end of that field, somewhere down in the distance, there is a gate. And here you are at this end, and you need to get to that gate that's on the, kind of adjacent diagonal point over there somewhere, right? And you need to do that on a daily basis. So what happens? You open the gate that you're coming out of and you start walking. You start, even though it's overgrown, you know that the quickest and fastest way is a straight line from here to there. So what happens? You basically go ahead and you start your little trajectory down that path that doesn't exist, that's overgrown, but you start walking from where you are to where you want to be. And you do that on a daily basis, and you repeat that action day in, day out, right? all of a sudden one day, guess what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. There's going to be a path that's going to be created wherever the grass basically has been stomped on over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's going to be a path, and very soon it's going to be very well delineated. You don't even have to go and cut it or mow it or anything. It's just like, just by doing the walking, it's going to create an absolute path. A pathway. Now imagine this, and you know that that's essentially, now there are many different ways in which you could actually go from here to there. You could actually decide that you want to go in a kind of curved line instead of a straight line. You could actually go here to then go there. You could do many different ways toward the same outcome result, i.e. which is to go past through that gate that's on that point over there. But remember, humans, very kind of quick fix mentality where we just want to go from here to there. Now, you could think on the path from here to there that actually, you want to get some extra steps in, you want to get some extra exercise. So you would go around the path and you would get to the gate. But no, we decide that quick, fast, let's just get through it, right? So what does that mean? All of a sudden we have a path right there. But what would happen, and this is the same as habits, right? Our habits, they get ingrained because of this repetitive nature that we engage upon, right? Where we know that there's a trigger, I need to get through that gate. There is the behavior, which is, okay, I'm going to walk myself to be able to get through that gate, and the result is getting through the gate, right? That is a habit loop. It's scientifically validated in many different studies, many different ways, but it's really simple, right? It's really simple. It's just that you have a trigger of something that basically triggers you to want to get a particular outcome or a particular result. And what you put in the middle of that habit loop is essentially what's going to be in your best interest or not so much. Right? There are different choices that you can insert. So whenever we're changing a habit, guess what? We are actually changing this middle bit. We're changing the part where we have control over. Even though it feels, because our habits feel so automatic, right, that it feels like we have no control, actually we do. Just because we're triggered to do something doesn't mean that we have to utilize the behavior that we have always used. It means that we can actually change the direction. In fact, we can change the position of the gate. Imagine that. Imagine that. So the gate, instead of going in that diagonal over there, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, I've decided that I'm going to change it and I'm going to put it to the left diagonal. So I leave my gate right here, and instead of walking that way, I start walking in a direct line to my gate that is now on the left-hand side. Since the gate that I'm in is also on the left-hand side, that kind of just feels like a direct line to a different place, but the result is the same. Look at it. You've got a trigger, you've got to get through the gate. You're walking yourself in a different direction to what you were before, and you're still getting a result, which is to walk through the gate. Is this making sense? Because I want to make sure, seems like a really simple little piece, but it's such an important part of understanding how it is that we have control over our habits, how we have control over what it is that we're doing. So I'd love to make sure, give me some loves, give me some likes, so that I know that you guys are getting this. Because you see, that gate is essentially the result that we're wanting to create. And the same thing applies pretty much in every one way that we choose to change our habits. Because we're going to be applying the same principle in every way that we, essentially in everything that we're wanting to change. So the way in which that operates is going, the behavior, the piece in the middle, that's great to see that you guys are getting this. So the piece in the middle is the piece within our choice. And here's where it gets really interesting, right? The way to change anything is to change that piece in the middle, okay? So we know that. But we need to examine, in order to be able to change the piece in the middle, we need to examine what is the result that we're trying to achieve. What's the outcome? Why is it important? What am I getting from this? If we're wanting to break a habit, and mind you, let's just go back to that field that we were talking about before, that large unattended field. What happens after a while with, the fact that we've changed the gate from the right diagonal to the left, right? What happens with that path after a while? Nothing happens. It doesn't get exercised, right? And as a result, it gets neglected. And as a result, what happens? The grass or whatever was there before overgrows once more. What happens to the left side? Becomes the beaten path again, right? Now, think about from this perspective. That path, the original path that we had from here to there, right? It didn't disappear. We didn't break it. We didn't eradicate it. We didn't change it. We didn't, banish it to the depths of hell. We literally stopped using it. And as a result of stopping using it, it just is no longer able to kind of be identified in the same way that it was before. It's not triggered in the same way that it was before. And so can you see in the same way, and that's why I love the analogy of this field, because in the same way that that's the case with the habits that we have ingrained for a very long time, we don't break habits, we don't change habits, we create new ones. Okay, we create a new way of getting our result. That is a very important distinction. It's a very big piece of this puzzle, and it comes to that whole idea of, how is this rewarding me? What is it that I'm trying to achieve here? What is it that I'm wanting to gain? And what is it that I'm already gaining as a result of doing this? And then, of course, what are the other possible alternatives? Right, in terms of actually that behavior piece, the piece in the middle, what are some other ways that I could do this to get the result that I'm looking for? And you might be asking, but hang on a second, what is the result that I'm wanting? Because that is one of the pieces that people get most, like when we're looking at overeating, or we're looking at, eating a tub of ice cream in one sitting. What am I wanting to get out of that? For different people, it's different things. For some people, it might be just it might be a mindless, like wanting to basically get worries out of your mind. For another person, it might be the physical, depends, they might be a very kinesthetic person. So feeling that ice cream or the coldness and everything else, it's actually a meditative process. Think about it. Anytime that you're eating anything in a mindless way, right? And I'm using food again just as an example, but it can be anything that we do in a mindless way. We're literally just doing it without really considering what it is that we're doing, right? And so we need to then look at it and go, okay, well, what else do I want to get out of this? And what is it that I think I'm going to get out of this to engage in this situation to begin with? So let's talk about the drivers. What are the drivers? What are the things that motivate us to do things? There's only really two reasons as to why humans do anything. One is to be loved, and the other is to feel good enough. Right? Those are the only two reasons. This is proven in psychology in many different ways. You can go and you can look at any issue in your life right now, anything that's causing you discomfort, anything that's causing you a challenge or, some kind of unease, and you will be able to boil that down to one of those two situations. It's like either fear of loss of love, fear of being not loved and the wanting of being loved, or the fear of not being good enough. Right? That is pretty much the only two reasons as to why we do anything. And we have these needs that we work to fulfill as part of being human. I didn't make this up. It's just unfortunately the way that it's wired. And so, we've got these needs, and the needs are, and in fact, this is some work on Maslow's work, hierarchy of needs. And, Tony Robbins has also done some more work on this and refinements, which is great. And Tony Robbins in particular talks about these 6 human needs, right? And let's talk about that, because the context of changing habits, of making different choices in terms of our habits, we need to think about it and consider from the way of and the piece that, hang on a second, we are doing something, that behavior is getting us a result. And the result might be that we eat the ice cream, right? Or that we get through the gate. But what is it that I want to feel as a result of implementing that behavior and getting that result, like, why do I want to get through the gate, and why do I want to eat the ice cream, right? So looking at that and really engaging in that line of questioning to really understand why it is that we're being driven and motivated to do that is going to be important. And it comes back down to these 6 human needs. Okay, so let's talk about what they are. And then I want you to consider for yourself, where could this be true for you, right? Where is this actually playing a role for you? So the 6 human needs are certainty, uncertainty. I'll tell you what they are, and then we'll go through and I'll describe them. Certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, significance, growth and contribution. Okay, so basically love and connection is together. That's why we have 6, not 7. Okay, just in case you're wondering. And so love, let's start with certainty, uncertainty. So certainty is all about knowing, being absolutely certain, as the name suggests, that I'm going to do something and this is the result that I'm going to get. It's that absolute confidence and clarity that this is how it's going to be. All these needs, though, the first 4 at least, they're paradoxical. So in the same way that we crave certainty, that we crave security and foundation and base and just, knowledge that everything is going to be okay, we crave uncertainty, fun, novelty, different. It's that whole kind of need for the exact opposite of what certainty provides us. And so how is this important? Well, when we actually are choosing our behavior that gets engaged in those habit loops, we're making those choices based on these needs and the fulfillment of these needs. And the result that we're hoping for is the thing that is going to fulfill these needs. Now, the thing about it is that there are different classes of ways in which we can fulfill them, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So let's continue going through the habits, but that's why this is so vital. Right? It's so vital because unless we start to acknowledge and understand that we are doing things, we are being driven almost by our human nature and the needs that we're working to fulfill, we think that we are at the mercy of some, obscure force in terms of our habits and the choices that we make in our day-to-day. But it's not true. We actually have so much more control if we care to examine how. Okay, so I hope this is making sense. Let me know if you need clarity on any of these things in the comments by just asking questions, but hopefully it's making sense so far. So then we have uncertainty. As I said, it's that need for novelty, and there is that very paradoxical nature of these needs is that they polarize each other, and they're certainly kind of almost opposites. Okay. Then we come to significance, and significance and love and connection are opposite. So what is significance? Significance is the need to feel important. It's the need to feel special. It's the need to feel, singular in a particular way, to feel important, as I said. Like it's that need to feel like you matter, okay? Then there is the opposite need of love and connection, which is to feel part of a community, to feel that you belong, to feel that, that kind of peer group, love, support, whatever it is. But basically, again, can you see how those 2 needs are very paradoxical, right? There is the need to feel important and special and the need to feel part of something. Okay, so again, we do things, think about it, from an overeating perspective. It's possible that if you lived by yourself, that you wouldn't overeat if that's something that you do with a partner or as a part of a family or whatever it is, because essentially there is almost a social script and an expectation of how things are based on how things are in your personal environment, of how you're going to behave based on who you hang out with. Right? What and who you are when you are with a lot of friends versus another set of friends, right? Like we often have different types of groups that we engage in, that with one of those groups, we might show up in a certain way. For another group, we might show up in a different way. For another group, we may show up in a yet different way again. And so can you see, we are almost chameleons in the way that we show up based on what it is that is being required of us at that particular moment in time. And that also is important because you see, That's where love and connection and, of course, significance play a role. Looking at all of that and looking at, for example, drinking is a great example of this. You know, for one group of friends, we might decide that, you know, because that's what they do, we'll drink. For another lot of friends who don't drink, we're like, okay, whatever. Right? Unless, of course, you've obviously got an addiction of some kind, which means that you probably would behave consistently in either way, or that you're a non-drinker at all, which basically means that you would not actually engage, even though, you know, some friends drink, you still won't drink because that's just how you operate, okay? So ultimately, it's looking at who am I in the context of my own values, my own kind of system of choices and decisions, and how is that being influenced by these needs that I have to connect, to be part of a group, and or to be apart from the group, okay? Is this making sense? Let me know if this is, you know, kind of making sense. Give me some love, give me some likes. I want to make sure that you guys are getting this. So love and significance love and connection and significance, again, they are paradoxical, okay? Then there are two other needs, which is the need for growth and contribution. You see, the first four, we will do absolutely anything to fulfill. And some people hang out in fulfilling only those four. But in order to be truly fulfilled as humans, we need the other two. We need all six, which is growth and contribution. As humans, we have this intense, innate need of feeling like we're progressing, right? Feeling like we're growing, feeling like we are able to, you know, expand what it is that we're doing and who we are. And we also have that need for contribution, right? To feel like we're actually, you know, valued for the ability to contribute in our local and, you know, not so local communities. But basically, those needs, unless they are in balance of, you know, kind of being fulfilled, we start to get out of balance and we start to do things that are going to, in one way or another, fulfill those needs, okay? And the way that we fulfill needs, there are 4 different class experiences in which we do this, okay? And some are going to be extremely beneficial, and as you'll see in a moment as I describe them, and others not so much, right? So we need to be really conscious and aware about these needs and the classes of experience that we want to have as we go about fulfilling that habit loop that I talked about: trigger, behavior, result. Because if we don't do that, we again are once more unconscious about what it is that we're creating in our lives. And make no mistake, but there is a ripple effect that goes on and that happens as a result of how we go about fulfilling our 6 human needs, right? And if you look at result, that really is like, you know, I have a poster in front of me, in front of my desk, that says this: true communication is the response you get, right? So often we need to look at what does life demonstrate, because by looking at what life is demonstrating, other than what it is that you think you see or that you would like to see, you need to look at it and ask yourself, okay, so my habits, what are my habits like? Do I need to change my habits? Well, look at what life demonstrates. Are you feeling at your best? Are you feeling like, you know, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way, right? You might feel that there's nothing, absolutely zero wrong with your current habits. And if that's the case, fantastic. Because ultimately your life is going in a way that you're happy and comfortable with, right? However, if you think that there is a habit that you are engaging in and you don't think that that habit is a problem, right? But what life demonstrates is that it creates a whole lot of chaos in the way you feel, in your relationships, in your community, whatever it is, right? You then need to actually question that. How is it actually, am I actually in alignment with what I'm saying? Because sometimes it's easy to be in denial when it comes to changing habits, right? Because what happens? It's not comfortable. It's not easy. It's not second nature. Second nature is that beaten path from here to there, right? Have you ever moved home and driven to your old home when you already moved to your new home? I've done that from time to time. And I can tell you, it happens because, again, of that whole autopilot behavior, right? Which we all engage in from time to time. And again, this is no different. So how do we understand whether our habits are helping us or are robbing us? That is really a great question. And this is where these class experiences come in. So class experience 1 is something like this. Whatever it is that the result of that habit that you have, it's good for you. It feels good. Feels good when you're doing it. It's good for you. It's good for others. And it's good for the greater good, right? It just basically is good all around. There are many, many, many more positives than there are negatives, right? And you can decide what that is for you. And mind you, that's also changeable, right? So as an example, some person or a person might find that running is their happy place, you know, like it's good for them, like basically it feels good for them whilst they're doing it. It's good for them, it's good for others, it's good for the greater good because they're a better person as a result of being less stressed when they run, right? So just as an example. But other people might find that running is actually, for me, for example, oh my God, I want to die when I'm doing that thing. I love exercising, but certainly not running, right? And so for me, that would probably constitute a class 2 experience, which is it does not feel good when I'm doing it, right? However, it's good for me. It's good, and again, it may be good for me because if I have knee problems, then it's not necessarily good for me. But typically, you know, let's just go from the perspective that, you know, exercise in general is good for me. It'll be good for others because I'm going to be, you know, a nicer person to be around. And then, of course, it's great. It's good for the greater good because if I'm kind of clear-minded, then I can be of greater benefit to others. Okay, so that's just again an example. Class experience 3. Class experience 3 is that whatever it is that you're doing feels good whilst you're doing it, but it's not good for you, it's not good for others, and it's not good for the greater good. Okay, so let's pick something. You know, some people might pick, I don't know, drinking alcohol, or, you know, it doesn't feel great when they're doing it. Like, you know, I have never met anybody who has told me that the first time they drank beer that they enjoyed it, right? Like, nobody. In fact, that happens with most alcohol. You know, that's why alcohol is disguised in sugary kind of flavors, because it doesn't taste good, right? And people will do things that feel good in the moment. So doesn't feel good. It's not basically, sorry, if it doesn't feel good in the moment, or it does feel good in the moment, but it's not good for you, it's not good for others, it's not good for the long term. So that's a category 3, okay? Then there's a class experience 4, which is whatever it is that you're doing, it does not feel good for you in the moment, it is not good for you doing it, it's not good for others, and it's not good for the long term. So that's, for example, you know, drug use might fall into that category. Like, you might enjoy, people start it because they kind of enjoy the result that they, or part of the results that they get, right? Getting out of themselves, whatever it is that they're doing it for. But certainly it doesn't feel good. It's not good for them. It's not good for others. It's not good for the greater good. So can you see there's these 4 different categories? And if you need to, you can always go back to this replay and listen to it again and maybe take some notes so that you can start to examine your own habits around how it is, what class experiences your existing habit is actually fulfilling, right? That is a vital, vital, vital question, because if you don't ask yourself that question, you're going to continue being mindless about whatever it is that you're doing. So you see, understanding yourself, knowing yourself in terms of this is crucial. It's absolutely key. And that's why it's big idea number 1. Because in here, in this one big idea, I've given you so many different things to consider in terms of how you may apply this new knowledge and this new understanding to different areas, to making adjustments to different areas that are going to benefit you. First and foremost, by understanding, okay, if I want this kind of result, whatever the result is, right? What other activities can I place within that behavior that's going to give me a positive outcome at the end of this? Because let's say, for example, right, if the result, the outcome that we're looking for is community, okay? We want to feel like we are engaged and belong to a community. There are many different ways of actually achieving that from a behavior perspective. We can join a drinking club, a poker card club, a exercise club, a baking club, a whatever, right? Again, these are all examples. But can you see that the same outcome that we're wanting to achieve, we can actually achieve that in various different input, i.e. behavior types of ways. And so then we need to ask, okay, that behavior, what class experience is it serving? If I join a drinking club, call it a wine club, right? Call it a wine appreciation club. Where does that fit in terms of, does it feel good while I'm doing it? And really honestly, does it feel good? I mean, I don't know about you, I hate wine. In fact, I hate alcohol in general. So for me, and it's just a personal thing, it's a personal choice. It's not a moralistic determination or judgment on anybody or on any behavior. But for me, it's just not something that I enjoy. So basically, if that's the case, then where does it fit in my value system for me, right? Joining a drinking club is certainly not going to be a class experience 1 or 2 for me. It's actually going to be a 3 or 4 as far as I'm concerned. A baking club is going to pretty much fall into the same category for me because I don't particularly want to be eating all of the stuff that I bake. I can bake and I bake really damn well, too well in fact, but I don't do it because I know that it's not good for me, it's not good for my family, it's not good for the greater good, right? And so even though it's amazing whilst I'm eating it. But can you see, it's about looking at what choices are we making for the result that we're wanting to create. And so again, joining a sewing club for me fits into a 1 or 2 class experience, right? Because all of a sudden it's like I've got connection, I've got community, I've got all of that. In fact, that's one of the things that I did. If you read my book, Fertility Breakthrough, I actually describe it in there when I started quilting, right? And it was very much because of wanting to kind of find something that was going to fulfill this need for getting out of my head, but in a way that was actually going to be healthy and beneficial, right? So then you've got a system here, you've got a methodology to make choices and adjust your choices based on what it is that you actually can do on a list of a whole lot of alternatives and different opportunities and different, things that you might want to engage in, again, based on these class experiences that fulfill the needs that you're wanting to fulfill. Is this making sense? I hope that it's making sense. Please do let me know. Signal somehow. Give me some love, give me some likes. In fact, write on the comments, yes, making sense. That would be great because then I know that you guys are getting it and that we can kind of move on to the next thing. So getting clarity on all of this is going to be vital, and knowing what works for you is absolutely precious. So key idea number 1 is exactly that. Then, of course, the big idea number 2 is start seeing yourself as you want to be. And it's fascinating because there is so much research these days. Research is notoriously, how do we put this? It's very elaborate, it is very time consuming, it's certainly very intricate, and it takes so much time to actually become mainstream practice, right? In fact, from a scientific publication to something becoming, part of modern kind of practical doing in clinical practice, it takes between 12 to 17 years. So there you go, almost 2 decades to actually filter down the information that we get from science through to, basically practical usability. And often it takes hundreds of studies to be able to enumerate, the benefits and how those benefits can be practically applied. And one of the things that I've always known to be beneficial, and that's just through clinical practice, that now has so much more backing by science, is this whole idea of mental rehearsal, right? Mental rehearsal is nothing more, nothing less than visualization. In fact, Shakti Gawain wrote a beautiful little book, gosh, more than 20 years ago now, called Creative Visualization, in which she describes a whole lot of different ways to implement visualizations. To this day, it's one of the most lovely books I find on the topic, alongside The New Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. That book as well is absolutely amazing. But let me boil it down for you, right? In fact, I actually went around to look for some research on this. And Neuron, the journal Neuron 2018, there was a study titled Shaping Reality Through Mental Rehearsal. Ultimately, this is the one sentence that I basically, wanted to get to your attention right now. The study further demonstrates that mental practice and physical movements share common neuro subspace. Now, let me translate that. What does it mean? It means that the brain doesn't know the difference between something that is vividly imagined and a situation that's actually occurring. Okay, so how can you utilize that for your own benefit? And there were many other studies. In fact, there was another one on mental rehearsal that I loved, which I shared it with my patients yesterday, which was the effect of positive visualization on optimism scores in people who were depressed. And what they found is that basically the process of visualizing a positive and optimal outcome actually improved optimism scores in people who were depressed. What else do we need to say, right? Other than the fact that it works. And so what do you do with it? And you can do anything that you wish, but here's what I recommend in the context of changing habits that I recommend you use it for. And that is to see yourself as the person you want to become. Right? Because here's what that means and here's what that does. When you focus and you start to see yourself as a person who is a certain way, you start to behave in that way. So if I am a person who is healthy, who exercises regularly, who takes care of their health, guess what? All of a sudden I start behaving in that way because my self-image dictates that I must, without somebody else externally pressuring me into it or believing that I should, right? I start acting to whatever it is that I say I am. And that makes a huge difference in changing habits. There are many books, there are many studies, many different publications around the findings of this very simple fact that what you visualize and what you tell yourself that you are, you become. Right? So let's apply it here in the context of changing habits. I mean, I know that I did this for myself, right? So about 2 years ago, I decided that, okay, you know what? I had my children. I was in the worst shape of my life, and I decided enough is enough. I need to make sure that I make a change here for my own good, my children's good, and of course the greater good. And so I did, and I started to do exactly that. Going to the gym, eating well, exercising, doing all of those things, which incidentally, I didn't have time for. I didn't really care for it so much, other than the fact that I wanted the result. And, it was kind of very time consuming. So I had to work my life around making sure that this happened because I knew I was so busy at work and doing all sorts of things that I do that it's like, I'm not going to prioritize this unless I have an actual appointment with a human being to get to a place at a particular time. That's not going to happen. And I knew that worked for me. And it had worked for me before when I had a training buddy ages ago, and then she moved away, and then I just was left without a training buddy and without going to the gym. So when I decided to make this change again, I decided, okay, well, how am I going to make this happen? Training buddy was the first thing that came to mind, and I couldn't find anyone who would commit to going, as much as I wanted to go and as regularly and at the same time and all of that. So in the end, I just hired a personal trainer, right? Now, obviously, you might not be able to do that, but you certainly can figure out a group class or something. The key aspect here, the key takeaway is that you need to find and structure your day and whatever it is that you want to change and create in a way that is going to work for you. right? To just leave it to chance is never going to do it. It's never going to happen. And so, you know, that whole idea of starting to see the result. And for me, it was very much, you know, like I had total clarity of what I wanted to look like, where I wanted to achieve, where I wanted to be, and what I wanted to achieve. And I kept reinforcing that in my mind. And when I didn't want to go, which was often, and when I was there and it was painful and I just wanted to quit, I literally just kept playing that little movie in my mind. And so the book, The New Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, it was a fantastic one. There is a great little technique in there. And I'm going to give you a practical little tip here in terms of this technique. It's called the theater of the mind. What it is, because there's many different ways of visualizing. There's many different ways of doing it. Some people see it all in technicolor, in 3D, whatever. Some people see it in flat black and white. And they're just kind of like thinking through rather than actually seeing it in their mind's eye what's going on. However you do it, research proves it's fine. It will work regardless. So you don't need to worry about, am I doing it right? You'll be doing it right. If you're doing it, you'll be doing it right. And whatever it is, the way that for me, because for me, I could only ever visualize flat black and white and not be able to really kind of, it was really hard to concentrate and focus on it. And when I found the technique of the theater of the mind, I thought, yes, that's definitely for me. And I started to use that. And I was very consistent. I was able to be very consistent with it. And honestly, that, and this book I read, I don't know, more than 25 years ago now, but it was the book that absolutely changed my life for that one thing, that one technique. And so let me explain to you how it works. It's very simple. So you sit down and you imagine that you're sitting in a movie theater. Okay, and just those old-fashioned movie theaters with the kind of, you know, auditorium-looking chairs, and, you know, in front of you you've got the big, massive screen. The only difference is that in the movie that's playing is the movie that you are the director, producer, actor, protagonist. You know, like you are it. You absolutely dictate what's going to go on in that movie screen in front of you. Okay, and so what it is that you're doing here is a variety of things of your choosing. Let's say, for example, if you're wanting to change the way in which you, I don't know, eat, okay, and you want to eat more greens, visualize yourself not only like sitting down watching in the movie in front of you, like eating the greens, but enjoying it, right? Making it, and the fun that you're going to be having, and just make it as lively as possible. You know, picture the people that are going to be there, how you're going to be feeling, the laugh that you're going to have, the enjoyment that you're going to have, and all of those pieces combined, right? You want to make it as real as possible. And you want to make it in such a way, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, by the way. Literally, you can do that. And that's what I used to do. I used to do it like 15 seconds at a time, right? I used to pick the snippet, you know, the kind of the crescendo moment in that movie, and I would just play it over and over and over and over. And I would just, like, in the beginning, I used to set an alarm and just do it, right? And then I basically was able to just like do it. And then I would do it even with my eyes open, right? And just kind of like imagine that whole thing happening in like in seconds. The point is that you're consistently engaging with who you want to become, because you see, achieving your goals is not a matter of what you will get by working towards and achieving them. Achieving your goals, it ultimately becomes who you will become as a result of achieving them. And this process of visualization of the changes that you want to create, of habit, of whatever it is, and you can apply this, as I said, to every area of your life, is going to help you to create exactly that, the person who does these things. So think about it, reverse engineer it. Who is the person who does these things, right? And then look at it and figure out what parts of that do you want to take for yourself? Who do you want to become? So that is big idea number 2. Really focus on it. And there is so much more. I mean, gosh, we're running out of time and I only have literally another 10 minutes. I'm going to be going 10 minutes over based on this, but the fact that we're already running late and I still have one more idea to go. And so I won't have time to go through the life changer method that I've outlined and described very clearly in my book, Fertility Breakthrough. So you might want to get that and work through it. It's a wonderful methodology that I've created to help my patients, basically. And it's all about being able to understand what it is that you're dealing with, not in a judgmental way, not in a way that says, you know, like, oh, you're a loser because you're eating ice cream. But hey, okay, I'm craving ice cream and I want to eat it. What does it mean? Right? What am I trying to fulfill? See, that's factual. That's something that you can take charge of. You can't take charge of, oh, you're a loser because you're eating ice cream. Does that make sense? Right? It's not in your best interest and it doesn't help you. So that kind of categorization, when you do something that goes against the change that you're wanting to make, is unhelpful at least, right? And cruel. Why would you want to do that to yourself? Let's change that to visualizing who you want to become and becoming closer to that each day, right? In every way, in every area of your life. That is what makes the biggest change, okay? So that's something that I highly recommend. And then, of course, big idea number 3 is commit to one thing. Like, you know, we get so ambitious being human and all, and deciding that we want to change everything in our lives at the same time. And then we fail at all of it. And we start to get really down on ourselves in terms of like, oh, but you know, we start calling ourselves names. Like, you know, I'm a loser, I'm this, I'm that, because I'm not. Let's choose to just like let that go altogether. And let's just go, okay, what's the one thing, one change, one tiny little thing that I can do, that I want to do, and that I will do? You see, there are so many. Just on that sentence alone, I could speak for an entire day. Because you see, what you want to do versus what you can do versus what you want to do versus what you will actually do are completely different. And so don't be overambitious is really what I want to say here in terms of changing your habits. Pick the one thing that if you were to do that one thing that you want to do, that you will do, that will make everything else easier or unnecessary. Right? For me, the hardest thing that I found, you know, in making habit changes has always been food. Right? I love food. Who doesn't love food, right? And it's a legal drug. So, hey, it changes state, right? So most people are addicted to food in one way or another. It just is how it is, right? But here's the thing. There are things that I was absolutely unwilling to do in terms of changing. So when I decided that I wanted to make a change in terms of my health and my body. So I decided to look at, okay, what is the one area that I can do, that I want to do, and that I will do, right? And I picked exercise because it was easier than me looking at food at that particular time, right? Then, because I was already engaged and doing it, and it just became a habit, right? And it just became part of my life. Like now, I exercise two times a day just because that's what I love to do. Right? Nobody has to force me. Nobody has to make me. Nobody has to, you know, that's why sometimes when I do my Facebook Lives, I'm in my, you know, gym gear and, you know, like it's just how it is. Because like I've either been to the gym or I'm going to the gym. In fact, this morning I've come back from the gym, given my hair, check it out, right? And so, but it happens because of exactly that, because it's something that I have actually made a part of my life because I enjoy it now. And this is essentially what happens with new habits. Like in the beginning, if somebody said that to me, that I would ever do something like that, I'd be going like, you are absolutely out of your mind. You are out of your mind. There is zero chance that that's ever going to happen, right? Think about yourself. Times where you developed yourself and your process into something that you would have never thought, right? Again, these habits are no different. But what you need to do is you need to commit to begin with to one very easy, simple thing that you can do, that you want to do, and that you will do. Because otherwise, you will just continue going around in circles, not getting a result. And make it micro. You know, make it tiny. Make it like, How did I start drinking, 3 litres of water a day? This is a 700 ml glass. It fits 700 mils, right? It's lovely glass, that's huge, as you can see, and it literally sits here. I know that in order for me to have 700 mils, in order for me to have 2 litres of water a day, I need to have at least 3 of those, right? It happens that I have 4, typically. Great, right? I'm fulfilling my water intake just by having 3, 4 of these, okay? Which 3 litres is kind of what I aim at. And so when I'm in the office and I'm here and I know that I have at least 3 of these, I know that already I've done my water intake for the day, right? And then whatever else I have over and above that, great, done, okay? But can you see, this is a matter of environment. This wasn't always like this. Right? I didn't used to drink as much water as I needed. And so what ended up happening is like I'm trying to kind of figure out, okay, what are the pieces that I need to put in my environment that are going to be triggers to a behavior that will give me a good result? And that is essentially what you need to start asking yourself. But start with one thing. Don't try and start with every possible thing under the sun, because then you will fail and you get down on yourself and you're going to think that you can't do it, which is not true. It's just that you're trying to do too many things at the same time. Does that make sense? Give me some love, give me some likes. I want to make sure that this is really kind of, you're getting there. And one thing that I would suggest, there are so many different things that I could say about this, and obviously we've completely run out of time, so I won't be able to go into all of the pieces that I wanted to share with you, but there's a couple of books that I would absolutely love to recommend. One is called Indistractable. Right, so it's about distracting, so Indistractable. The other one is Atomic Habits. Okay, so if you Google these, you'll be able to find it. I don't know all the authors from the top of my head. And the other book is The 4 Agreements. The 4 Agreements, anyone who knows me knows this is my Bible because it is such a simple set of agreements that will change everything if you apply it, like everything else, right? So the reason that I mention the 4 agreements is this. One of the agreements is do your best. And I always talk about doing your best. Don't think that you're going to be perfect. You're going to fail. There will be days that despite your best intentions and your greatest intentions, you're still going to come up short. As long as you do your best, that's all that matters. You do not have to be perfect. I wish that there would be a day ever where I would be perfect, right? Doesn't happen, but I have my kind of minimum things that I absolutely must hit, must achieve every single day. And that has come up and has happened as a result of practice, right? And now there are things that, like, in fact, I'm about to write a new one today of the 3 or 4 things in my day that absolutely must happen every single day, right? Because that's how you progress. That's how you get better at whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so it becomes fun, right? Because I make a game of it with myself, right? Those things that I say that I want to do for my day in terms of my new habits or whatever it is, I gamify. I kind of go, okay, cool, this is a game. So me achieving it and crossing or ticking a part that's done for the day is the objective, is the game for today, right? That's the result that I want to achieve. I want to feel accomplished by making sure that I've hit those 3 things. Then guess what? Nobody needs to remind me. Nobody needs to tell me. Nobody needs to nag me. I just do it because it's a game that I'm playing with myself. Right? So make it fun as well. Make it fun. Make it something that you can commit to and that you will and want to commit to, right? Finding a buddy in the beginning is also really useful, right? A buddy where you can basically go, okay, great. You've got your goal, I've got my goal. For like a period of about a year and a half, I had a buddy that I texted or talked on the phone to. For the first 6 months, we talked on the phone every morning. It was like a minute. How'd you go? What'd you struggle with? What happened? And it was so good because by having that, what ended up being is that I didn't want to have to report the next day that I let myself down and therefore let my buddy down by not being a good example, right? So then I just would go, okay, right, I'm doing it. And the first 6 months that I did 0 sugar. Right, so 0 sugar, chocolate, whatever. And it was basically, I ended up doing a whole year and a half of no sugar, no dairy, no gluten, all of that by just having that 1 minute, connection each day to get it done. And then it just became easy. It just became a part of what I did, right? So it's about looking and engineering your life around what it is that you want to create. So I highly recommend that. I hope that you guys have gotten some benefit out of this session. I hope that you absolutely have gotten something that has sparked, this desire to make some adjustments, make some changes. And remember, the habit loop doesn't change, right? You change it. By looking at the trigger is going to always be the trigger. Then you've got the behavior, what it is that you want to actually input there to get your result, okay? And what's interesting about triggers is that with time, they lose their effect. If you change the behavior, and by the way, I mean, there are still things that you'll be triggered forever on. For example, if you want to brush your teeth, right? Like if you feel that your teeth are furry, you're going to want to brush your teeth. That's a trigger, right? So triggers are not a bad thing. They just are, okay? So making sure that you identify what it is that they mean and how it is that you're going to utilize it for your best interest is really the key aspect here. Just want to do a couple of brief announcements. The Fertility Challenge is currently on. If you are not yet a part of the Fertility Challenge and you would like to join us, this is day 2, so you're right on time. fertilitychallenge.online/register. Just type that into a browser, fertilitychallenge.online/register. The next week's Ask Gabriela Rosa live is going to be on how to eat your way to parenthood, and same place, same time. And finally, if you want personalized advice from myself in terms of your fertility journey, and you want to understand whether we can be of assistance in your case, go ahead and book a time to have a chat with me. It's thefertile.me, so thefertile.me/chat. And I want you to know one thing. You are more powerful, capable, determined, and stronger than you ever give yourself credit for. Use it. Use it for your own benefit. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Until then, bye for now.